So here we are for a much overdue Your Genetic Type conversation with Dr. John Thomas and myself. Dr. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good, yeah. So here we are, and this is really our first conversation together online since we've done the Perfect Storm Summit. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to watch that. It was definitely a labor of love for both of us in terms of how much energy we put into it, and I'm sure from the people that you talked to, they got a lot of value out of it. What are some of the feedback that you got from the people that heard it?
Yeah, so, patients or people I know that tuned in, nothing but positive feedback. Everybody just kind of raved about the speaker list that we put together and the topics that were covered and the things that they learned from it, and heard a lot of feedback that, that were some of the summits that maybe they've listened to previously, that sometimes things get a little too technical and over their head. A lot of great feedback, just that all the speakers kind of brought it down to a level that everyone could understand, and everybody had a lot of really great takeaways from each of the speakers. And I think that's what we kind of want to do today is kind of go through some of the biggest highlights that we both learned, because I know you always mentioned we're kind of a little biased and a little selfish when we kind of do these things and interviewing other people, because there's things we learn as well. For me, there was a lot of a great take-home points, a lot of great things that I went and down some rabbit holes to research, and that's kind of what I want to really focus on. And then for those that did tune into the summit, kind of maybe a recap or maybe some things to focus on as you go back and listen to it, if you are a VIP member of it. And if you didn't, you missed out, but you could still access the summit VIP component. So.
And how would they do that? Just, like a shameless plug, would they go to, I don't even know, would they go to perfectstorm.com, or how would they actually purchase it?
Yeah, they just go to perfectstormsummit.com, and then they can purchase the after summit replay there for $97, with the 8 sessions and all the VIP bonuses and stuff.
Yeah, and that's really great about it is there's the cheat sheets where it talks about what were the main points for people that and the other thing that people didn't listen to that they want to kind of have the takeaways. What I really liked about it, John, I discovered was the being able to listen to something at 1.25 or 1.5 speed, because you can get through it quickly, and then but you still get the information. So yeah, as far as we did for the VIP people, kind of what we're doing right now, in terms of, hey, John, right after the speaker spoke, what were your major take-homes? What were my major take-homes? And then, of course, we asked each speaker, given that it's a Perfect Storm Summit, as a society, what can we do to mitigate the perfect storm or maximize the expression of good health? So those are all the things that we talked about. And I guess we could dive right into it. As far as now that we've had a couple of weeks go by that it's kind of out of our minds the way that it had been. What sticks out to you, John, in terms of like the first thing that kind of pops into your head with the most enjoyable, or not enjoyable, but the one that you had the most connection with?
Yeah, so there's a couple of the speakers that I think really resonate with me the most, and just because maybe they're things that I see on an ongoing basis, and that maybe they were a little bit more of the technical ones, like Susan Owens talking about oxalates and Nathan Bryan talking about nitric oxide, especially from the genetic perspective, huge. Bob Miller, talking about, the mast cell component, all those different stressors that can stimulate mast cells and histamine release, regardless if you have histamine genetic variants or not. And that was pretty good. And that's something that I've been doing a little research on myself, especially with what I talk about the mold, because we know mold and mycotoxins are huge stimulators of mast cells. So trying to kind of come up with like a hit list, all those different things that can stimulate that release of histamine in the body, that can kind of keep that vicious cycle going. And there are things that sometimes we're not even aware of on a daily basis, like EMF, with 5G coming out now, that's something that is showing that can stimulate mast cells. And if somebody's got problems with histamine, it's going to be an uphill battle with some of the things that are around us. But I think, one thing, besides with the, the speakers themselves, and I'll kind of maybe delve in a little bit more on some of my high points with some of my favorite speakers, was I think when we talk about that last question that we asked everybody, collectively as society, what are the things we can do? And it all went back to foundational, it went back down to, clean water, clean food, mindset, those type of things that just, we a lot of times we take for granted, and we're looking for that magic supplement, that magic diet, that magic answer. But those foundational things have to be really done, and they have to be kind of an afterthought. And a lot of times, we loosen the reins much on some of those things, which adds to that toxic load. And the whole reason we call this a Perfect Storm Summit was really talking about how those genetic factors couple with our environment. And as the world gets more toxic, we have to work harder to reduce that toxic load, reduce those stressors that are adding to the soup per se, that just puts more stress on our genetic predisposition. And that was one really great thing I liked that we did, is asking the speakers, collectively, what can we do? And it was kind of that reoccurring theme. Pretty much every single person is a lot of those foundational things, because if that's not in place, anything that you do to support your genetic expression, anything you do to detoxify, to support your adrenals, to address Lyme or mold, there's going to be limitations, if that foundational stuff is not there. What were some of your favorite, take homes from some of the speakers?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. I really did. I listened to each one 2 or 3 times each, and I could listen to all of them again. So they were all really great. It really was the foundational stuff again as well. Like, I really enjoyed Nathan Bryan's nitric oxide, because most people don't even know what it is, and if they do, it's more like, okay, let's just take arginine, and that will support my nitric oxide. But what Nathan was saying is that arginine is never the rate limiting step in terms of a nitric oxide deficiency, meaning if arginine is an amino acid that makes nitric oxide, you're not going to be depleted in nitric oxide because you're depleted in arginine. And that's like the dirty secret that supplement companies don't want you to know, because they make lots of money on that. But I thought what was really great about that nitric oxide is that, being it's such a new compound that we didn't really know about, how it has its hand in everyone's cookie jar, so to speak. It really decreases that that NAD, the NOx enzyme, which I don't want to get too complicated, but if you have EMFs, if you have histamines, if you have iron issues, if you have oxidative stress and viral loads, you're going to stimulate your NOx enzyme to produce free radicals, which is helpful. Like Dr. Bob Miller said, it's not a bad thing. We want an immune system to make free radicals. If you don't make free radicals, then you will succumb to an illness very, very quickly. But now that we are still in the midst, while we were even recording at the beginning with COVID-19, and now here we still are, people understand that cytokine storm concept. And one of the things that Susan Owen talked about, which I thought was really good, was, is it our viral exposure that's the problem, or is it our immune system's inability to turn off its expression to that viral exposure? Which again would be that stimulation of that NOx enzyme, which is a double-edged sword. You want it, but you don't want it on all the time. But the whole point of what I'm saying is, what Nathan did was he brought the connection in terms of, if you can support your nitric oxide production, or at least minimize its depletion, then you can slow down that cytokine storm and really create a lot of beneficial therapeutic benefits, like increased blood flow, increased clarity, mental clarity, increased energy for people that exercise, increased vascularity and muscular contractions, so many things. So for all of it, but I'll say personally, like, I've been going through things, some personal family stuff right now with my own thing, and I have genetic susceptibilities, but nothing rings more true. Like, okay, I can supplement, I can go gluten-free, I can keep my histamines low, I could even take DAO enzyme. But if I am not controlling the relationships in, or my impression of those relationships, or, just my self-talk, then that's going to minimize or at least destroy any progress that I'm making. And I think, to me, like now, whenever I have stressors in my own life, I think about those things that we talked about, like you just mentioned. The best part of the summit was the foundational question that we asked, that was, okay, like, get your mindset straight, actualize what's going on, get good quality air, have good quality relationships. I think, to me, that's kind of what stuck the most. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, was such a recurring theme with everybody, is those foundations, you know, and a lot of people work hard on it, but then, for some reason, we kind of slack off on a lot of those foundational things, just because being human, right? The world gets the best of us with everything going on, and we loosen the reins too much. And it's almost like we're starting from scratch, which, you have to work hard and be consciously aware of those foundational things. Kind of add on what you talked about with Nathan Bryan. You talked about, nitric oxide has, its hand in the cookie jar. And I think, people that have chronic health issues, nitric oxide regulation is something that, should be on radar. I think in the next couple of years, I really think that it's going to be a little bit more of kind of a foundational thing that people look at, because we were, I know you mentioned talking to their other people, like when you talked to Robbie personally, who was one of the speakers that talked about the saunas, that, he feels Nathan Bryan is going to be kind of a rock star, and a celebrity based on the research he's doing on nitric oxide. But when you mentioned it's got its hands cookie jar, nitric oxide controls inflammation. You mentioned some of the symptoms like energy, mood aspects. Nitric oxide plays a role in like regulating brain chemistry through that biopterin pathway. So, if you've got health challenges and just not really responding to things you're doing, nitric oxide needs to be on the radar with the variants. And what's really great is, there is something you can do at home, like those test strips, saliva test strips, that it's not a perfect science. It's not an exact science, but the best that we have, but it does give a pretty good depiction in terms of where somebody's nitric oxide levels are. And it's something I use with patients in practice, and we start seeing a really good correlation that if their nitric oxide levels are depleted on those test strips, as we support that and those levels come up, so does their energy and mood and better sleep. So there is a strong correlation with ramping up and supporting nitric oxide properly, along with how people feel and function. And so, you mentioned kind of going back and listening to these talks again. It's something that whenever I've got some downtime, I'm listening, to some of these replays, on a scrubbed faster speed to kind of get through them. But picking up more and more bullet points every single time I listened to them, which was really, really great. Who else besides Nathan was one of your favorites?
Yeah, I mean, of course, between Ben and Bob, Ben Lynch and Bob Miller, they were both great. But, Ben always brings a different angle to it. I kind of feel like he's a bit of a rogue guy now, and I feel like his answers really, what we like to talk to a lot. We invited specific guests because they have specialties, if you will, in the epigenetic backgrounds, like Dr. Schaffner. She was more in terms of the three buckets in terms of heavy metals and EMF and toxins. And so we asked her about that. We talked to Grace Liu about her microbiome and the role that histamines and potential oxalates, and Susan with oxalates. But with Ben, we asked him what do you see as being one of the major epigenetic factors that can create the triggers to go off in the loaded genetic gun, if you will. Or what Ben says, what are the things that dirty up the genes in terms of dirty genes? And you would expect to hear heavy metals or plastics, or even Dr. Mike Johnson got into the polyesters and the runoff in the water and how that's contaminated and so forth. But what Ben talked about was clutter, and And I'm looking at my desk and thinking, did I live his talk, right? I mean, I got a little bit of clutter on my desk here. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Like you think about, some people don't throw things away because there's personal experience and emotion tied in that. But that can also create a lot of fractioning of your mind and fractioning of your productiveness, and you're not as focused and concentrated, and you have sort of open-tailed, unfinished business, so to speak. And you layer that on top of other things, and you see it all the time. Like I just got off the call with the consultant, like, well, I'm eating healthy, I'm not eating, like she had an iron challenge. I don't eat, enriched foods, and I'm like, you're looking at 30,000 view foot here. You got to look at it in terms of it's everything we process. And most of the times it's not what you're doing, it's what you're not doing in terms of your everyday life. Like, do you have multiple windows open? Do you finish a task in an email before you go on and do some research? And then when you do some research, you got sidetracked, and then you start looking at Amazon, and then you go to the top of the loop and look at break those cycles. That's clutter. I think to me, that's probably, again, in Ben Lynch fashion, really delivering such amazing content. That was probably one of the things that really kind of, hit home in terms of it's more than just telling you what's going on in your genetics and your blood work for me.
Yeah.
How about for you?
Yeah, and Ben talking about the clutter aspect, because I've been, since he said that, work really hard at trying to kind of make sure before I leave for the day everything's done, and desk is cleared, for the weekend, things of that nature, because that's something that we know consciously of all the things we have to do in a given day, where that adds stress to the body. And if you have that clutter around you, papers on the desk, disorganization, even though it's something that's not on your active or your conscious mind, it's something that you see. And so that is adding stress or a load to your subconscious mind, and is impacting your physiology and your genetic expression. So when kind of Ben talked about that, for him personally, where, just that clutter was kind of adding stress, and he didn't realize it. And once he realized that, it was a pretty big game changer with things. And it's something that, since that talk with him, it's something that with my patients, we have that conversation about, the things that we actively don't think about, that are in our environment, that are in our vision, that aren't interactive thoughts, that just add to the stress. The more that you can bring that stuff from that kind of subconscious or that kind of non-awareness to more of an awareness, and realize that these things around us are adding stress and adding to that toxic load, and become more aware and diligent at removing those other stressors, then it's like you've got less things in a given day to worry about, because there aren't all these things kind of in the backdrop that are just kind of adding to that. Because when you're talking about, when Ben talks about dirty genes, right, or speeding up or slowing down these enzymes that maybe you go into it, they work a little slower, a little faster, but you add that stress, to it by adding more adrenaline or more of a hormonal load that's got to work harder, it is going to catch up with you and add to how you're feeling and functioning. And, I've had a handful of patients, at least half a dozen patients since that interview with Ben in the beginning of April, when we interviewed him, that we've had the conversation. And, it's been a big difference in their stress level, whether it be, anxiety or mood components or sleep components. Just kind of being aware of clutter around them makes a big difference on a day-to-day basis. And it's kind of, with the topic of this Perfect Storm Summit, it's so surreal how things have evolved over the years, right? And especially if you look at Ben, where, for him, it started with MTHFR, and he was one of the first ones out there that really, was pushing that. And I still, to this day, get new patients that, hey, I have MTHFR, what do I do? What's the right supplement to take? Because this MTHFR is the answer to everything. And we've known for years that it's not, but people are still in that mindset, and that's their foot in the door about that MTHFR. And it has evolved so much to the point where now we have this Perfect Storm Summit, where yes, genetics and MTHFR is important, but it's all these other factors and how all these factors merge, whether genetic expression, that creates a perfect storm and is why people, don't recover when they should. And that's kind of led us into really streamlining it and kind of creating that your genetic type concept to try and make it as easy as possible for people to get some organization and some clarity on this. But it's so funny when I listen back to these talks and I just think back, like personally, when I started, or when I tell patients kind of like how my practice has evolved with this, you just kind of look back and kind of laugh of like where we were years ago, 5 years ago, to where we are now in this genetic world. And it's been fast moving, and it's been a whirlwind, but it's definitely something that gives a lot of answers and a lot of resources and how-tos to really help people recover and get their lives back.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great segue, John, in terms of the evolution of your genetic type for you and I. We said, hey, let's do a MTHFR crash course, right?
Yeah.
That was our first product. And it was a great course, but we learned very quickly that it was too technical, I think, right? It was pretty, it was a lot of information, but then we figured, well, you know what? Like, we find that if we look at the commonalities of all the people that we work with, there's really 7 core symptoms, or 7 core, not symptoms, but presentations that we see. And so I guess our mission statement is varied, but our mission statement has to include in terms of, hey, I have MTHFR, what do I do, for that to no longer be a question anymore, right? Because it goes so much deeper than MTHFR. And it is very rewarding for people that haven't been told answers and are suffering and is not for the lack of trying. I always say it's not for your lack of trying, your willingness, your education, your intelligence, your motivation. It's just something's being missed. A lot of things are being missed. And then MTHFR gets on their radar. And if it gets on their radar, it's typically, okay, what does this mean? Well, what do I do? And ultimately they get to the point of, okay, I take more folate or methylfolate.
Or folic acid.
Yeah, unfortunately there is I take more folic acid. That should be like, that's even like one step worse, right? Like, if I find out I have MTHFR, what do? I just figure out, all I do is take folic acid, because the problem is that methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase enzyme can't convert folic acid into methylated folate. So that's the last thing you would want to do. But ultimately, what we are doing with your genetic type is streamlining things. So we can say, hey, take our quiz. Like, if you haven't taken our quiz, take our quiz. It's a free quiz. yourgenetictype.com, and then there's a quiz that you take. And you'll get an answer to what based on your questions. There's 5 questions per category, and there's 7 categories, so 35 questions. And it does have a progress bar, so you can see like, oh my God, how much longer do I got to go here? Like, it's 35 questions, you'll get it done. And then it gives you an answer. And the answer is, hey, based on your questions and the answers that you gave, you're the understimulated type. And that's something we could talk about, John, is maybe talk about, like, what does that information mean to them now, and what can they do about what they've just learned?
Yeah. So, I think with, what we've done with the your genetic type concept, and our goal with this is to really give people an entry point, right? But an entry point that is not just, hey, I have MTHFR, what do I do about it, right? It's an entry point to have a little bit more of an understanding of how that genetic piece of the puzzle is most likely a missing piece of why things that you've done previously didn't respond the way you should have, right? And I always tell patients that, hey, a lot of times we're going to find out some information based on genetic factors, and some of the things you've done previously didn't respond. We're going to go back to, and you're having a completely different response or experience to it, just because there was a missing ingredient. And I always use the example of baking a cake, right? If you have all these ingredients, I got to go into the bowl. and you got to throw that cake in the oven, and you want that gluten-free chocolate cake to turn out perfect, right? But you figured you put the eggs in it, and you still throw that cake in the oven. How's the cake going to turn out? Not very good, you know? And so sometimes understand the genetic piece of the puzzle is that missing ingredient. But the thing is people, their first step is MTHFR, but then they understand based on things they're listening to out there that there's more to the story, and it gets very confusing. It gets very frustrating. There's not a lot of doctors that are well versed beyond MTHFR, unfortunately. So what do? What's that next step? So this your genetic type concept we kind of created based on what we see clinically in practice, to determine, okay, what is that kind of introductory kind of step that people can take to figure out, okay, based on the health concerns that they have, where is their focus? Where is their starting point for this that's going to kind of get things going in the right direction? And it's something that, you know, we've kind of created based on what we see clinically, based on kind of like 7 kind of similar presentations that then when you look at genetics, they usually have variants there. They usually have the same stressors. And it really is kind of like a foundational genetic aspect, right? It is not just MTHFR, it's MTHFR plus then some, but it is that kind of foundational genetic starting point, and then you can evolve it from there, okay? Because we talked about, you know, we started out talking today about what we learned from the summit. You know, all the speakers talked about foundational things, right? They talked about, you know, clean water, clean food, you know, proper mindset, all that stuff. We've taken kind of this your genetic type concept and said, what's that foundational genetic piece of the puzzle for each individual that has to be supported for everything else you do from a support standpoint, diet-wise, supplement-wise, detoxification, whatever it may be, for that stuff to work as beneficial as you want it to do. You need to support your core genetic foundational type in that process so that everything can work the way it should. And so that's kind of where this your genetic type concept evolved, and it really merges as a piggyback really nicely with things people have learned to this point, whether through our Perfect Storm Summit, people that have read Dr. Lynch's book, The Dirty Genes book. It kind of takes a lot of things that he talks about in that book, but we've done is kind of taken it to a deeper level and you know, beyond the 7 genes he talked about, but then also, you know, really classified it into, you know, some subjective complaints that kind of subcategorize to give each person like what their starting point is. Are they the histamine type? Are they understimulated type? Are they the overstimulated type? And your symptoms that are chronic can give you a lot of insight into where that starting point is. And, you know, as this genetic stuff evolves, so will, you know, the things that we're doing. But, you know, what we've put together so far, me is a really, really good kind of first step for people wanting to understand how their genetic expression is that missing piece.
Yeah, and it's exciting because you know I think we went down for a deep gulp of air and went under the water and created, you know, the summit, and then we came up and, you know, it was the middle of the summer and we got kids and here we're taking a deep breath again and going down underneath. So I think that's kind of where we are, and you and I have talked a lot about how we want to add value to the people that are, you know, our community, and really resonate with the concepts of understanding what's the missing link, how to prioritize, how to organize, so that you don't have to do the research yourself, even if you want, but we're giving you the tools so that you can leapfrog ahead of that, because we work one-on-one with clients and we know not everyone can work one-on-one with the provider. So our goal is to create a community and create information products for you guys, to create the ability to get the testing done. You know, what are the best supplements for your specific genetic type, and also create a community. So those are our things that we want to do. What else did I miss in there, John, in terms of our goals?
No, I think you covered it. You know, we talk about kind of our mission with what we're, you know, trying to accomplish here is really education and build community and give people a better understanding of how to take health back into their own hand. You know, specifically the foundational thing, right? Because the foundational things need to be done, and there are foundational things from a genetic perspective, from a dietary perspective, you know, from a support standpoint that, you know, can be easily done. And then if people need to take it to the next level, then you find a doctor well-versed. But you mentioned the community aspect. We talked a lot about through the summit, and after the summit, up until even the last couple of weeks, about just really, really, bringing a lot of education and a lot of great, content out there to everyone, so they can have a better understanding and be more well versed in a lot of these concepts. So they have a better understanding of why their body's responding the way it is, and more importantly, of what they can do to really resolve it.
Yeah, and I think the more sophisticated we get too, John, because I remember even talking to you with your talk, and understanding what your weak links are and what your genetic type is. Our goal is you may have a lot of supplements, but let's customize those so that we trim away the edges so that you don't have what you don't need. But more importantly, you don't use them every day. And I think that's where some of that education process comes. Because how would you say, in terms of a lot of the people that I work with, and I'm sure the same thing for you, is they're doing a lot of really good things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're just missing the mark. And they need to shift their emphasis or their understanding or the foundation products or the way they're using their supplements. But how would you make a comment in terms of how close yet how far people are, I guess?
Yeah, and I think if you kind of talk about, back to kind of like our mission or our goal with this, right? Because people are taking stuff, right? The reason they're taking stuff is because they're reading or hearing about different things that they should be taking, all right? From some really, really great people, knowledgeable people out there, right? But the thing is when they're talking about some of those things, it really comes down to a one size fits all right? And what we really try to do with this type concept is now take it from a one size fits all and maybe narrow that down a little bit more, right? And even your genetic type concept, yes, there's 7 core genetic types that we've kind of classified. There's overlap, and everybody's not going to fit into that. If it was as easy as that, then hey, it'd be done, and then boom, here's your genetic type. It's what you got to do, and you're going to be fixed, right? But there's layers to this. But I think what we really want to focus on is really streamlining everything in terms of the knowledge, also in terms of what people need to do. Because and we talk about all the time, people coming in with shopping bags or that Santa Claus bag with all the supplements. Like, okay, why are you taking this? Or like, I heard this doctor talk about this and it sounded good. Well, yeah, it's right on, but is that good for you? Let's maybe kind of scale things back and look at, big picture here. Let's look at that 30,000 foot view. Let's look at your genetic expression. And more importantly, what are some of those genetic priorities? And let's kind of scale this stuff down and to a starting point where you're taking less things, or maybe you're not going to take things every single day based on, whatever that support is. And it really kind of streamlines things to a little bit more focused and a little bit more customized approach with the things that they're going to be learning from us, or they have learned from us, and they're going to continue to from the content and things we're going to put out, in terms of how genetic expression and their genetic type is a missing piece of this. And so I think, a big, take home for this is there's a lot of great stuff out there, not that, discrediting that stuff, because, there's some really, really great experts that I listen to all the time, take notes, do my research, and figure out how it helps me, my family, and my patients, and how that plays into what we know about the genetic component of that. But this genetic type concept is really kind of taking that shopping bag of stuff and really narrowing it down that's more customizable and specific for that individual.
Yeah, exactly. So we wanted to get on and sort of break the ice again and start to do consistent weekly Facebook Lives, which we will transcribe and get into an audio file so that we'll have our new podcast. We're going to organize all our old talks so that those will be part of the podcast as well. Whenever we do live like this, we do it through Zoom, so we can't see your comments, but we do encourage you to comment if you're watching this from our Facebook group. If you're not a member of our Facebook group, it is Your Genetic Type. That's the name of it. It's a free group and a free page, sorry. And we will be broadcasting from there, making announcements. If you haven't taken your genetic type test, then go to yourgenetictype.com and take the test. And then ultimately, we want to create information products for you guys so that you can get, at the end of the day, get your life back. And that's a lot of the things that I talk to and John talk to our clients is, okay, like what are you suffering with now? What would it be like if you didn't have this? What would you be doing? And that's our goal. We want to add value to your life, memories and occasions and life events that we only have one go around here, and you shouldn't be the person in the books, in the research. You should be applying it and using it and benefiting from it. So I think at the end of the day, we want to understand your biology and get results faster, right? Basically.
Yeah. And that's what we want to do. Is you mentioned, a lot of people are versed and they are trying to do the research out there, right? And really what we're trying to do is bring that research to you in bite-sized pieces and more, organized and, taking out the high points to really kind of streamline things for everybody so that they can actually start applying that foundational stuff. The more people that can apply that foundational stuff, the less likelihood that, that they're going to need to really put more time and energy and keep bouncing from doctor to doctor, right? Because some of those missing pieces that have been missing for a while based on genetic predisposition are now being addressed properly. And that's something that just I see in my practice, and that's why we put this together. All right, hey, there's foundational things that pretty much everybody needs to be doing that they're not doing based on genetic predisposition. And when they start doing that, everything else that I do with them works that much better. And a lot of the stuff that I do with them has stuff that they've done previously. And that's where this kind of concept really evolved from.
Absolutely. And there's so much, just that nitric oxide, it's the iron overload, it's the histamine, it's so many, it's bioflow.
Oxalates, bioflow. Yeah, I listened to Dr. Kelly Halderman's talk this weekend on the Detox 2.5 bioflow and metabolism and just some really, really great stuff in there. And, that's what the Perfect Storm of Sun was about. It brought all these different concepts, to 18 plus hours of content that really delves into that stuff for everybody.
Yeah, and we just did it for selfish purposes so we could listen to it over and over again. And every now and then, if you guys want to peek over our shoulder, you're able to do that too. Yeah. So we have a lot more exciting stuff. I know we want to get into talking about spectrum disorders and your genetic type. We really do want to get into mood disorders as well. Even infertility and pregnancy. I mean, we've got so many areas that we want to go in, but just to scratch the surface again, make sure you go check us out at yourgenetictype.com, take that free quiz, and potentially look at getting the replay of the summit. And then lastly, keep tuned in Tuesdays at 3 p.m. We will be doing this on a weekly basis. And make sure you throw in questions in there, because that's how we'll know how to help you. Put your questions in the comments. I'll figure out, if you guys are technical, how we can do a Facebook Live for both of us where we can actually see your questions if it's not through Zoom. That could be helpful too, because then one day you and I, John, could have like a Q&A hot seat where people just listen in and we give the answers to whatever their questions are. But yeah, I mean, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, so you mentioned even in the comment section, there's something you want us to kind of discuss in the future weeks, a concept that you've heard us talk about that you want maybe a little bit more explanation on, or a concept that we haven't talked about. If you've been following some of the things we've been doing, over the last year or so, just put down in the comment box and, we'll chat about that, put it on our schedule and get that information out to you.
Yeah, and then lastly, we also have a YouTube channel as well. It's Your Genetic Type. And if you know of anyone that's suffering, we always say, please send them in terms of the content our way. Share, like, comment, repost, however it is, so that way we can get the word out there and we can help more people.
Yep. See everybody next
time.
All right.
We'll see you on the next version of Your Genetic Type. Take care.